The rain drummed against the cracked window of my studio apartment, each drop a tiny hammer striking glass. My daughter's soft breathing mingled with the storm, her tiny chest rising and falling in her second-hand crib. 15 months old today. 15 months since I'd fled from him, from that life, from everything I thought I wanted. I traced my finger along Lily's cheek, velvet soft and flushed with sleep. She had his eyes, dark, intense, demanding attention even when closed. The same eyes that had captured me that night at Bellini's, the upscale Italian restaurant where I'd been working double shifts to cover my mother's medical bills. I shouldn't have called him, I whispered to the darkness, my voice barely audible above the rain. The phone still clutched in my trembling hand felt impossibly heavy. One call to upend everything I'd carefully constructed. One moment of desperation when the eviction notice appeared on my door this morning. One terrible mistake. The ceiling dripped in the corner, a steady plink-plink into the pot I'd positioned beneath it. My apartment was falling apart. Just like my resolve. Just like my promise to never let him know about her. I closed my eyes, memories washing over me like the storm outside. The white tablecloths at Bellini's. The scent of truffle oil and aged wine, the way conversations had hushed when he entered, though no one knew exactly why they fell silent. Just that they should. Alexander Vega. They never said his name above a whisper. The youngest son who'd taken control of his family's business interests after his father's convenient heart attack. Handsome enough to grace magazine covers. Dangerous enough that people crossed the street when his gleaming black Bentley approached. I hadn't known any of this when I'd spilled red wine on his immaculate white shirt. I'd only seen a handsome customer, felt the instant heat of embarrassment, smelled his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, as I frantically dabbed at the spreading stain. "I'm so sorry," I'd stammered, my hands shaking as I tried to blot the expensive fabric with a napkin. "I'll pay for the cleaning, I promise." His fingers had wrapped around my wrist, stilling my movements. Not painfully tight, but firm. Commanding. His security detail, always at least 2 men, tensed at his table. "What's your name?" His voice was quiet, but it cut through the restaurant's ambient noise like a blade. "Eliza," I'd whispered. "Eliza Collins." Those dark eyes had assessed me, catalogued every detail of my face, my body, my being. I'd felt stripped bare under that gaze. Vulnerable in a way that made my heart race. "Eliza." The way he said my name made it sound like something precious, something he'd just acquired. "You couldn't afford this shirt on a year's salary." I'd flinched, reality crashing back. Just another rich jerk. I'd turned to leave when he spoke again. "But I like the fire in your eyes when I insulted you. Have dinner with me tomorrow, and we'll call it even." Not a question. A statement. As if my acceptance was a foregone conclusion. I should have said no. I should have walked away. But my mother's hospital bills were piling up, and something in his expression, a fleeting glimpse of loneliness perhaps, had made me nod. One dinner became 2, became weekends at his penthouse, became me moving into his fortified mansion on the cliffs overlooking the city, became me falling in love with a man who collected people like objects, who showed affection through possession, protection, control. A cry from the crib snapped me back to the present. Lily was awake, her face scrunching up as she prepared to wail louder. I lifted her into my arms, inhaling her baby-sweet scent, feeling her tiny fingers grasp at my threadbare sweater. "Shh, sweetheart," I murmured against her dark curls. "Mommy's here." But for how long? Alexander would know where I was now. One phone call traced to this dingy apartment building on the wrong side of town. I'd managed to stay hidden for 15 months, working cash jobs, using a friend's address for mail, staying off social media. But one moment of weakness had undone it all. I hadn't told him about Lily on the call. I'd only asked for help with the rent just until I could find better work, but Paolo, his ever-present right-hand man who'd answered the phone, had heard Lily crying in the background, had asked questions I wasn't prepared to answer. "Sir," she said, "the baby's yours." I hadn't actually said those words, but Paolo had connected the dots. Alexander would come now. Alexander would take what he believed belonged to him. "We should leave," I told Lily as I changed her diaper on the mattress that served as both my bed and changing table. Pack up and disappear again. But where would we go? With less than $200 to my name and an eviction looming, our options were non-existent. The women's shelter was full. I'd already called. My few friends couldn't risk harboring me once Alexander started looking. My mother was in a care facility, the bills paid anonymously after I'd left him. Another golden chain binding me to him. The knock on my door came just after dawn, as the rain finally subsided. 3 sharp raps that made my blood freeze in my veins. Too soon. He couldn't be here already, but Alexander had resources, connections, the kind that could find anyone, anywhere, in hours rather than days. I clutched Lily to my chest, her small body warm against mine. For a wild moment I considered the fire escape, considered running. But the metal stairs had collapsed last winter, and no one had bothered to fix them. We were trapped. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Eliza. His voice, low and controlled, slipped through the cheap wood like smoke. Open the door. I pressed my lips to Lily's forehead, breathing in her scent one last time before our lives changed forever. I love you, I whispered. No matter what happens, remember Mommy loves you more than anything. My legs felt leaden as I crossed the small room. My hand shook as I unlatched the 3 locks, flimsy protection that would have taken his men seconds to breach if he'd chosen force instead of this illusion of choice. I opened the door just a crack, chain still in place, though the gesture was pointless. He stood in the dingy hallway, somehow making the peeling wallpaper and flickering fluorescent lights recede into the background. Alexander Vega didn't belong in places like this, yet he dominated the space completely. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than a year's rent from my apartment, the fabric molding perfectly to his broad shoulders. His dark hair was shorter than I remembered, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. But his eyes, those eyes that had haunted my dreams, were exactly the same. Dark pools that gave nothing away while seeing everything. 15 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days, he said quietly, his gaze moving past me to scan my apartment. That's how long you've been gone. He'd counted the days. Something twisted in my chest, fear, longing, despair. Paolo stood behind him, along with another suited man I didn't recognize. Both wore the telltale bulge of shoulder holsters beneath their jackets. Alexander never went anywhere without protection. Never left anything he valued unguarded. Let me in, Eliza. Still not a question. Never a question from him. I can't. My voice cracked. Please, just go. The rent money was a mistake. I'll figure something out. His expression hardened. The rent is the least of your concerns right now. He glanced at the chain on the door, then back to me. Either you remove that, or Paolo will. Your choice. But only one option leaves your door intact. Lily squirmed in my arms, making a soft cooing sound. Alexander's focus instantly shifted, his entire body tensing as he caught sight of the small bundle against my chest. The air between us charged with dangerous electricity. Is that... He didn't finish the sentence, but his knuckles whitened as his hands clenched at his sides. With trembling fingers, I unhooked the chain and stepped back. 15 months of running ended with that small surrender. He entered like he owned the space, like he owned me, his presence immediately making my apartment seem smaller, shabbier, more desperate. His security remained in the hallway, Paolo pulling the door closed behind his boss. The click of the latch sounded like a prison door sealing shut. Alexander stood motionless, staring at Lily. His face, usually so controlled, displayed a ripple of emotions I couldn't fully track. Shock, rage, wonder, possession. How old? He finally asked, his voice deceptively soft. 15 months. No point in lying. His jaw tightened. You were pregnant when you left. I didn't know for sure until 2 weeks later. And you didn't think I deserved to be informed? The dangerous edge in his voice made me instinctively step back. You would have locked me in that gilded cage of yours forever. The words rushed out before I could stop them. You never would have let either of us go. A muscle jumped in his cheek. She's mine. Again, not a question. She's a person, not a possession, I said, summoning courage I didn't know I had. And yes, biologically she's yours. But you don't know her. You don't know what she needs, what she likes, what frightens her. Alexander moved closer, his gaze never leaving Lily. I fought the urge to back away further, to shield her from his intensity. Instead, I held my ground, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "What's her name?" he asked, something almost vulnerable flickering across his features. "Lily." I swallowed hard. Lily Rose Collins. His eyes snapped to mine, dark fire burning in their depths. "Vega," he corrected. "Her name is Lily Rose Vega." I opened my mouth to argue, but the look on his face stopped me. This was just the beginning of the battle, and I needed to choose my fights carefully. He reached out, one finger gently brushing against Lily's cheek. She turned toward the touch, curious, unaware of the danger this man represented. "To my freedom, to the life I'd tried to build for us, she has my eyes," he murmured, something like awe softening his voice. "Yes." His gaze swept around the apartment, cataloging the water-stained ceiling, the threadbare furniture, the stack of past-due notices on my rickety table. His expression darkened with each detail he absorbed. "This is where you've been raising my child?" The question was ice-cold, accusing. "In this?" He gestured sharply. "This squalor?" "We've been safe," I countered, chin lifting, "and loved. That's what matters." "Safe?" He barked a harsh laugh. "The front door to this building doesn't even lock. The windows are single pane, practically an invitation to break in. There's black mold in the corner over there. The neighborhood is overrun with normal people just trying to survive," I interrupted. "Not everyone can afford penthouses and private security, Alexander." His name on my lips after so long seemed to affect him. His eyes locked with mine, and for a breathless moment, the air between us crackled with everything unsaid, everything we'd once been to each other. Then Lily squirmed and reached toward him, curious about this new person. The spell broke. "Pack your things," he said, pulling out his phone. "Only what you absolutely need for tonight. The rest will be replaced." "What? No!" Panic surged through me. "We're not going anywhere with you." He looked up from his phone, his expression almost pitying. "Yes, you are. This isn't a discussion, Eliza. You're being evicted regardless. Your choices are to come with me now, with some dignity and tact, or to be escorted out of here when the marshals arrive to change the locks. You can't just walk in here and take over our lives," I protested, though we both knew he could. He had the money, the power, the connections to do exactly that. "I'm not taking over your life." His voice softened marginally. "I'm saving it. Both your lives." He glanced down at Lily again, something fierce and protective crossing his features. "She deserves better than this, and deep down, you know it." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. He was right. Lily deserved better than a moldy apartment, second-hand clothes, and a mother who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet. But what would it cost us? Cost me, to accept his help. "We'll stay at a hotel," I suggested desperately. "You can help with that. Visit Lily. We can work something out." Alexander's expression hardened. "My daughter will not live in a hotel. Neither will you. Not when I have more than enough room." He stepped closer, until I could smell that familiar cologne. "You ran from me once, Eliza, took what was mine without a word. That won't happen again." The threat hung in the air between us, all the more frightening for being unspoken. If I went with him now, voluntarily, I might retain some small measure of control. If I fought, I'd lose everything. "1 bag," he repeated, glancing at his watch. 5 minutes. Then we leave. As I gathered our meager belongings with shaking hands, I knew that walking out that door with Alexander Vega meant the end of one life and the beginning of another. A life where Lily would have everything she could ever need, except perhaps a mother who was truly free. The journey from my crumbling apartment to Alexander's mansion was like traveling between worlds. His black Bentley glided silently through the city, Paolo driving while another security man, Marcus, I learned, sat in the passenger seat. Alexander and I occupied the back, Lily secured in a brand new car seat that had materialized within minutes of his phone call. "You still have the Cliff House," I observed, watching the familiar route unfold outside the tinted windows. Rain beaded on the glass, distorting the city lights into watery smears of color. "Did you expect me to move?" Alexander sat beside me, not touching but close enough that I felt the heat radiating from his body. His gaze kept returning to Lily, who had fallen asleep as soon as the car started moving. "That house has been in my family for generations." What he didn't say, what he didn't need to say, was that the mansion had been strategically built to be defensible, with only one winding road leading up to it, security systems that rivaled government installations, and clear sight lines in all directions. Perfect for a man with his kind of enemies. "I thought maybe you'd sold it after I left. After I betrayed you. After I took your child and disappeared." His expression tightened. "I don't discard valuable things simply because they've temporarily slipped from my grasp." The implication hung heavy in the air between us. I wasn't discarded, just temporarily misplaced. Now, reclaimed. I turned away, focusing on the familiar neighborhoods sliding past. We were leaving behind the struggling areas where I'd made my home, climbing into the hills where houses grew larger and farther apart, where gates and security systems became more prominent. Lily stirred in her sleep, one tiny hand curling into a fist above her blanket. "She looks like you," Alexander said quietly, breaking the silence that had stretched between us. "Around the eyes, she's mine. But her smile, the shape of her face, that's you." Something warm and dangerous flickered in my chest. "She's stubborn," I replied, unable to keep a hint of pride from my voice. "Knows what she wants and won't settle for less." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That sounds familiar. She doesn't like strawberries but loves blueberries. She sleeps with a stuffed elephant named Bo. She's afraid of the vacuum cleaner but fascinated by thunderstorms." The words tumbled out, important fragments of our daughter's life that he had missed, that I had kept from him. Guilt twisted through me, sharp and unexpected. Whatever Alexander was, whatever he had done, Lily was his daughter. Had I been wrong to keep them apart? "She started walking at 10 months, I continued softly. "Early," the doctor said. "She has 4 teeth and another coming in. My voice caught. "She says mama and up and no. No is her favorite word." Alexander listened, absorbing each detail with the same intensity he brought to every aspect of his life. His hand rested on the seat between us, fingers tense as if he wanted to reach out but was holding himself back. "I've missed so much," he said finally, his voice hardening. "Time I can never get back. I'm sorry." The apology slipped out before I could stop it, surprising us both. His eyes locked with mine, searching. "Are you?" Before I could answer, the car began climbing the final stretch of road leading to his mansion. Massive wrought iron gates swung open as we approached, cameras tracking our movement. The grounds were as immaculate as I remembered. Manicured lawns, strategic landscaping that eliminated potential hiding spots, subtle security features disguised as decorative elements. The house itself loomed at the end of the curved driveway, a modern fortress of stone, glass, and steel perched at the edge of the cliff. Lights blazed from the windows, turning the raindrops into sparkling diamonds as they fell. My stomach knotted at the sight. I had both loved and hated this place. Loved the beauty, the security, the luxury. Hated the isolation, the constant surveillance, the feeling of being a bird in a gilded cage. Paolo pulled to a stop under the covered portico. Before he could exit to open our doors, Alexander was already stepping out, moving around to my side. He opened my door himself, something he rarely did. He usually left such tasks to his security detail. The message wasn't subtle. Tonight was different. Tonight was personal. "Welcome home," he said as he helped me from the car, his hand warm against mine. I pulled away as soon as I was standing. "This isn't home." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he reached past me to carefully unbuckle Lily from her car seat. His movements were tentative, unpracticed, so unlike his usual confidence. "May I?" he asked, hands hovering near our sleeping daughter. The question, an actual request rather than a command, startled me. I nodded, watching as he gently lifted Lily into his arms. She stirred but didn't wake, settling against his chest as if she somehow recognized the safety of her father's embrace. The sight made my throat tighten. Alexander stood perfectly still, studying the tiny person in his arms with undisguised wonder. In that unguarded moment, I caught a glimpse of the man I had fallen in love with. Not the calculating businessman, or the feared underworld figure, but the man who could be tender, who understood the value of beautiful, fragile things. "She's perfect," he whispered, more to himself than to me. The massive front door opened before we reached it. Mrs. Hendricks, Alexander's housekeeper, stood in the entryway, her usual stern expression softened by curiosity, as she took in the scene, her employer carrying a sleeping child, me trailing behind with our single bag of belongings. "Mr. Vega," she greeted him, then turned to me with barely concealed surprise. "Miss Collins, it's been some time." "Mrs. Hendricks," I replied, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. She had never approved of me, viewing me as a temporary distraction for her employer. Now her gaze moved to Lily, eyes widening slightly as she registered the implications. "The blue suite has been prepared, as requested," she informed Alexander, recovering her professional demeanor. "And the adjacent room has been—" She hesitated, glancing at Lily again. "Modified according to your instructions." Alexander nodded. "Thank you. We'll need a light meal sent up, and tea for Miss Collins." He remembered how I'd always preferred tea to coffee, especially in the evening. The realization unsettled me. How many other details about me had he preserved, catalogued, kept close during our separation? Mrs. Hendricks disappeared down a hallway, and Alexander led the way upstairs. I followed, overwhelmed by the familiar scents and sounds of the mansion, the subtle fragrance of beeswax polish, the faint classical music playing from hidden speakers, the soft hum of the climate control system maintaining perfect temperature despite the storm outside. The blue suite was on the east wing's second floor, far from Alexander's master suite at the opposite end of the house. This small mercy allowed me to breathe a little easier. At least he wasn't assuming we would immediately return to sharing a bedroom. He pushed open the door to reveal a spacious sitting room decorated in shades of blue and cream. A fire crackled in the marble fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Through an archway, I glimpsed the bedroom with its enormous four-poster bed draped in blue silk. But what stopped me in my tracks was the adjoining room. The door stood open, revealing what had once been a small library, now transformed into a nursery. A handcrafted wooden crib dominated the center of the room, surrounded by stuffed animals, a rocking chair, and shelves filled with children's books. A mural of a fairy tale forest covered one wall, delicate and whimsical. "How did you—" I couldn't finish the question. He'd had mere hours since learning about Lily, yet the room looked as if it had been planned for weeks. "Money motivates quick work," Alexander replied simply, carrying Lily to the crib. He laid her down with surprising gentleness, tucking the blanket around her tiny form. "This is temporary. I'll have proper rooms designed for both of you." I approached the crib, noting the quality of everything in the nursery. The mobile hanging above was hand-painted, the stuffed animals organic cotton, the books first editions of classic children's tales, nothing but the best for a Vega heir. "She's not used to sleeping alone," I said, guilt twisting through me again. "At the apartment, she was always with me." Alexander's expression darkened momentarily. "She'll have her own space here. It's better that way." "Better for whom?" I challenged, keeping my voice low to avoid waking Lily. He straightened, his full height towering over me. "For all of us. She needs to develop independence. You need privacy, and I—" He stopped abruptly. "You need control." I finished for him. His eyes flashed. "I need to know my family is safe. That's not negotiable, Eliza." Family. The word hung between us, loaded with implications. Before I could respond, a discreet knock at the door announced Mrs. Hendricks with our meal. She wheeled in a cart laden with covered dishes, a teapot sending fragrant steam into the air. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Vega?" she asked, shooting another curious glance toward the nursery. "That's all for now. Thank you, Mrs. Hendricks." The dismissal was polite, but firm. After she left, Alexander gestured toward the small dining table by the window. "You should eat. You've lost weight." I hadn't realized he'd been cataloging the changes in my body, and the observation made me self-conscious. I was thinner than when I'd left, the combination of pregnancy, stress, and financial hardship leaving me more angular, my curves less pronounced. "Not hungry," I replied, though the aroma from the covered dishes made my stomach growl traitorously. He sighed, an unusual display of frustration. "You need to maintain your strength, for Lily's sake, if not your own." The manipulation was transparent but effective. I sank into one of the chairs, allowing him to remove the silver cover from my plate. Grilled salmon, asparagus, roasted potatoes, my favorite meal from before, another memory he'd preserved. Alexander poured tea into a delicate china cup, adding a splash of milk and half a teaspoon of honey, exactly how I preferred it. He placed the cup beside my plate, then took the seat opposite mine. "Aren't you eating?" I asked, picking up my fork. "I had dinner earlier." He watched as I took a bite, satisfaction crossing his features when I continued eating. "We need to discuss arrangements." I tensed. "Arrangements? For you and Lily? Your living situation, financial support, security measures, legal status." "Legal status?" I echoed, alarm rising. "Lily needs to be officially registered as my daughter, my heir. That means a DNA test for legal purposes, though it's merely a formality. I know she's mine." His certainty should have been offensive, but the resemblance between them was undeniable. And me? What's my legal status in this scenario? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Alexander's expression softened fractionally. "That depends on you, Eliza. On what I'm willing to agree to, you mean? On what you want." He leaned forward, his intense gaze locking with mine. "What do you want? Security for Lily? A career? Education? Tell me, and it's yours." "Everything but freedom," I thought, but didn't say. "I want to maintain custody of my daughter." "Our daughter," he corrected automatically, and that was never in question. "I'm not trying to take her from you, Eliza. I'm trying to provide for you both, as long as we stay here, under your roof, under your control." He didn't deny it. "I've spent 15 months not knowing where you were, if you were safe, if you were even alive. And all that time, my child was growing, learning, developing without me." His voice remained even, but his eyes betrayed the depth of his anger, his hurt. "So, yes, I want you here, where I can protect you, where I can be a father to Lily, where I can ensure neither of you ever lacks for anything again." The conviction in his voice stirred something in me. Not just fear, but a complicated tangle of emotions I wasn't ready to examine. In another life, with another man, his determination to provide and protect might have been romantic. With Alexander, it was a beautiful, dangerous trap. "I had reasons for leaving," I said quietly. "Then explain them to me." The command was soft, almost a plea. "Help me understand why you ran from everything I offered you." I set down my fork, appetite vanishing. "You didn't offer, Alexander. You imposed. There's a difference." "I gave you everything," he countered, frustration edging into his tone. "A home, security, luxury, my—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Your what?" I pressed, something reckless pushing me forward. His eyes met mine, dark and fathomless. "Everything," he repeated simply. But not himself. Not really. Alexander had given me possessions, protection, a position as his chosen companion. But he'd kept his innermost self locked away, sharing glimpses only in rare, unguarded moments. Like now, as he watched me across the table, vulnerability briefly visible beneath his controlled exterior. A cry from the nursery broke the tension. Lily was awake, her voice rising in confusion at the unfamiliar surroundings. I stood immediately, but Alexander was faster, already moving toward the doorway. "I'll get her," I said quickly, alarmed by his eagerness. "We'll both go." Not a command this time, but not quite a request either. Together we entered the nursery. Lily stood in the crib, tears streaking her chubby cheeks, hands gripping the railing. She spotted me and reached out, crying, "Mama," with desperate need. I lifted her, murmuring soothing words against her hair. She clung to me, hiccuping sobs gradually subsiding as I rocked her. Over her head I met Alexander's gaze, finding it fixed on us with naked longing. "She's afraid," I explained unnecessarily. New place, new sounds. He nodded, then tentatively reached out to stroke Lily's back. She turned at the touch, regarding him with wet, curious eyes. His eyes, studying him with the same intensity he studied her. "Hello, Lily," he said softly, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "I'm your father." She blinked at him, then reached out one small hand toward his face. Alexander remained perfectly still as she patted his cheek, exploring. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a breaking open, that made my heart twist painfully in my chest. In that moment, watching Alexander meet his daughter properly for the first time, I realized the magnitude of what I'd done in keeping them apart. Whatever my reasons, whatever my fears, I'd deprived them both of this connection. The knowledge settled like a stone in my stomach, heavy with implications. Lily's hand moved to the silver chain around Alexander's neck, the one he never removed, with the small medallion of Saint Michael, patron saint of protection. She tugged, fascinated by the glint of metal. "Careful, little one," he murmured, gently removing her fingers. "That's very special to me. Perhaps someday it will be yours." The tenderness in his voice, in his careful handling of her tiny fingers, revealed a side of Alexander few ever glimpsed. This was the man I'd fallen for. The one who existed beneath the power, the control, the dangerous reputation. The man who could love fiercely, protect relentlessly. The man who could become even more dangerous with something so precious to protect. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, turning dust motes into floating gold. I woke disoriented, the silken sheets and plush mattress foreign after months of sleeping on a threadbare futon. For a moment, panic seized me. Where was Lily? Then I heard her delighted giggle from the nursery, followed by a deeper, masculine murmur. "Alexander." I slipped from bed, pulling on the robe someone had laid out for me. Silk, in a shade of blue that matched my eyes. My feet were silent on the thick carpet as I approached the nursery doorway, pausing just outside to observe unseen. Alexander sat cross-legged on the floor, his usual impeccable suit replaced by dark jeans and a simple black sweater. The transformation was striking, less the untouchable crime lord, more the young father he was about to become in Lily's life. She sat opposite him, chubby legs splayed, completely absorbed in the wooden blocks they were stacking together. "That's it," he encouraged as she placed another block precariously atop their tower. "Careful now." His voice held none of the sharp command he used with his employees, none of the calculated charm he employed in business dealings. This voice was genuine, gentle, reserved for his daughter alone. The tower wobbled, then collapsed. Lily's face scrunched up in disappointment. But before tears could form, Alexander laughed. A real laugh, warm and unrestrained. "That's how we learn, little one," he told her, gathering the blocks again. "We build. It falls. We build again, stronger next time." Something in his words, in the tenderness of his expression, made my throat tighten. This was Alexander, stripped of pretense, of calculation. This was the man I'd glimpsed in rare, unguarded moments during our time together. The man I'd begun to love before fear drove me away. I must have made some small sound, because he looked up, dark eyes finding mine immediately. The vulnerability in his expression vanished, replaced by his usual careful control, though not completely. "Good morning," he said, rising smoothly to his feet. "We've been letting you sleep." Lily spotted me and crawled over with surprising speed, arms raised in her universal signal to be picked up. "Mama!" I lifted her, breathing in her baby scent, now mingled with the subtle fragrance of what was clearly an expensive baby shampoo. "You've bathed her," I observed, noting her clean curls and the fresh clothes she wore. A beautiful pale yellow dress I'd never seen before, with matching socks. "She had breakfast first," Alexander replied, as if anticipating criticism. "Blueberry pancakes. Mrs. Hendricks made them specially when I mentioned her preference." The thought of Alexander discussing our daughter's favorite foods with his housekeeper was oddly domestic, discordant with everything I knew about him. He moved closer, reaching out to straighten the little bow on Lily's dress. "I hope you don't mind the new clothes," he said, voice carefully neutral. "I had some things delivered last night." Her others were... He trailed off, but I knew what he wasn't saying. Her others were secondhand, worn, unworthy of a Vega. They were clean and comfortable, I said, unable to keep defensiveness from my tone. That's what matters to a baby, of course. He stepped back, hands sliding into his pockets. But there's no harm in having both quality and comfort. I couldn't argue with that, especially when Lily looked so content. She wriggled in my arms, reaching toward the blocks again. She's been building for nearly an hour, Alexander told me, pride evident in his voice. She's remarkably focused for her age. She always has been, I agreed, setting her down near the blocks. Even as a tiny baby, she'd stare at things forever, like she was trying to understand how they worked. Like her father, he said quietly. Our eyes met over Lily's head, acknowledgement passing between us. Yes, she had inherited more than just his eyes. She had his intensity, his determination, his fierce concentration. What else of him lived in her? What parts of his nature would emerge as she grew? The thought was both fascinating and terrifying. There are clothes for you as well, Alexander said, breaking the moment. In the closet, and toiletries in the bathroom. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, Mrs. Hendricks can arrange alternatives. The casual mention of new wardrobes and endless alternatives reminded me sharply of the disparity in our situations. Alexander could summon designer clothes overnight with a phone call. I had been debating whether to pay the electric bill or buy new shoes for Lily's growing feet. Thank you, I said stiffly, but I don't need new clothes. His eyes flicked over my body, taking in the worn t-shirt and leggings I'd slept in. As you wish. But they're there if you change your mind. Lily abandoned her blocks and crawled to Alexander, tugging at his pant leg. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms, and she immediately reached for the chain around his neck again. This time, he let her hold the medallion, watching her examine it with a softness in his eyes that made my heart twist. She likes shiny things, I said, to fill the silence. She has good taste. The corner of his mouth lifted in a half smile. This was my grandfather's. He gave it to me when I was 10, told me St. Michael would protect me from my enemies. Has he? I asked, before I could stop myself. Alexander's eyes met mine, suddenly intense. So far, but I've learned not to rely solely on saints for protection. The implied threat in his words, not directed at me, but at anyone who might threaten what was his, sent a shiver down my spine. I was reminded forcefully of who he was, what he did, the blood on his hands. Lily patted his cheek, oblivious to the darkness of her father's world, drawing his attention back to her. The transformation was immediate, his expression softening, the danger receding behind genuine affection. I've cleared my schedule for today, he said, bouncing Lily gently in his arms. I thought we might spend it together, the three of us. Playing happy families? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. His jaw tightened, getting to know my daughter and discussing our future. Our future. Not my future. Our future. As if it were already decided, already mapped out in his mind. Knowing Alexander, it probably was. I need to take a shower, I said, rather than engage with that loaded statement. Can you watch her for a few minutes? Of course. He seemed almost offended that I'd asked. Take your time. The bathroom attached to the blue suite was larger than my entire apartment had been, with marble surfaces, a rainfall shower, and a soaking tub big enough for two. The luxury that had once seemed normal now felt obscene after 15 months of struggling to survive. I showered quickly, wrapping myself in a fluffy towel afterward. Despite my resistance, curiosity drew me to the closet. I opened it to find rows of clothing in my size, dresses, jeans, blouses, even lingerie still in designer packaging, all in the colors and styles I'd favored before leaving. Alexander had remembered everything. The thoughtfulness of it, or the obsessiveness, depending on how you looked at it, was unsettling. Had he always expected me to return? Or had he maintained this collection like a shrine to what he'd lost? I chose jeans and a simple blouse, ignoring the designer labels. As I dressed, I caught sight of myself in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back looked both familiar and strange, clean, well-rested, draped in expensive fabric, but with eyes hardened by struggle, by fear, by survival. When I returned to the nursery, I found it empty. A momentary panic seized me until I heard voices from downstairs. I followed the sound to the mansion's sunroom, a glass-enclosed space overlooking the cliff and the ocean beyond. Alexander sat at a table laden with breakfast foods, Lily secured in a brand-new high chair beside him. "Just in time," he said, looking up as I entered. "Coffee?" "Tea, please." I took the seat opposite him, trying to ignore how normal this felt. Breakfast with Alexander, morning sunshine, the spectacular view. He poured tea from a silver pot, adding milk and honey without asking. I thought we'd eat, then perhaps walk in the gardens. Lily might enjoy the koi pond. The casual domesticity of his plans was jarring, as if we were any normal family planning a Sunday together. But the security detail visible through the windows, patrolling the grounds with subtle vigilance, served as a stark reminder of our reality. "Alexander," I began, setting down my cup. "We need to be clear about something. This arrangement, me being here with Lily, it's temporary, until I can find another place, get back on my feet." His expression hardened fractionally. "Is that what you want? To go back to struggling alone? To deprive Lily of stability? Of her birthright? Her birthright comes with strings attached. Dangerous strings. I can protect her, better than anyone." His certainty was absolute, better than you could alone. The truth of his words stung. At what cost? There doesn't have to be a cost, Eliza. He leaned forward, dark eyes intent on mine. "Not for you and Lily. Stay. Let me provide for you both. Let me be her father. While living under your control," I added softly. "Under my protection," he corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" When I left before, I stopped, aware of Lily watching us with curious eyes, absorbing our tones if not our words. Alexander's expression softened as he followed my gaze to our daughter. "Perhaps this conversation should continue later," he agreed. "For now, let's give Lily what she deserves, both her parents together, without tension between them." He was right, though it pained me to admit it. Lily deserved a peaceful day, free from the complications of her parents' relationship. I nodded my agreement, turning my attention to the breakfast spread. We spent the morning in the gardens, Alexander carrying Lily from one wonder to another, the koi pond where orange and white fish swirled in crystalline water, the rose garden with blooms as big as Lily's fist, the small orchard of apple and pear trees. Security men maintained a discreet distance, visible at the periphery of my vision, but never intruding on our strange family tableau. Alexander was different outdoors, more relaxed, less guarded. He pointed out butterflies to Lily, named birds for her, let her touch the rough bark of ancient trees. He seemed determined to give her the entire world, one sensory experience at a time. "She's fascinated by nature," he observed as Lily reached for a fallen maple leaf, turning it over in her tiny fingers. "She loves the park," I said, memories washing over me. Near our apartment, there's a small playground. I'd take her every morning, let her watch the birds and feel the grass. It was the highlight of her day. Alexander was quiet for a moment. "This property has 18 acres, room for as many playgrounds as she could want, room to run, to explore, room to grow up safe." The offer hung in the air between us, not just of material comforts, but of space, freedom, nature, all within his protected domain. A beautiful cage with the door left tantalizingly ajar. She'd miss her friends, I said, though it was a weak argument. At 15 months, Lily had no real friends, just other children she occasionally encountered at the park. She'll make new ones, better ones. His gaze was steady, unapologetic. Children of families I trust, who understand discretion. "Children of your business associates, you mean?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "Children of people who won't be a threat to her." His tone hardened. "You understand so little of my world, Eliza, yet you judge it harshly. Everything I do, every decision I make, every line I cross, is for protection, for security, for power," I countered. "Power is security." He shifted Lily in his arms as she grew restless. "Without it, we're vulnerable. I learned that lesson early. I won't let Lily learn it the same way." Before I could respond, Lily reached up to pat his face, perhaps sensing the tension in his voice. The gesture instantly softened his expression, the darkness receding as he smiled down at her. "Pa," she said clearly, stunning us both. "Pa." The word hung in the air between us, small but monumental. Lily repeated it, patting Alexander's face with greater insistence. "Pa!" I froze, watching emotions cascade across Alexander's normally controlled features. Surprise, wonder, fierce joy. He held Lily closer, his eyes suspiciously bright as he looked from her to me. "Is that—" He couldn't seem to finish the question. Her first time saying it, I confirmed softly. "She knows Mama, and a few other words, but never Papa or anything like it until now." Something shifted in Alexander's expression. A softening, a breaking open I'd rarely witnessed. He pressed his lips to Lily's forehead, eyes closing briefly. When he looked at me again, the naked vulnerability in his gaze made my heart twist painfully. "Thank you," he said simply. I didn't ask what he was thanking me for. For Lily? For not denying him this moment? For the 15 months I'd spent raising his daughter alone? Or for finally bringing her back to him? It didn't matter. The gratitude in his voice was genuine, stripping away the layers of power and control that usually defined him. In that moment, he wasn't Alexander Vega, feared leader of a criminal empire. He was just a father, hearing his child call for him for the first time. "She's smart," I said, to fill the charged silence. "Picks up words quickly, like her mother." His voice was gentle, almost reverent. "You always had a way with words." The first time we spoke, when you apologized for spilling wine on me, you were terrified, but eloquent. The memory washed over me, the crowded restaurant, my shaking hands, his dark, assessing gaze. "I thought you were going to have me fired." His mouth quirked. I considered it for about 3 seconds. Then I looked into your eyes and saw something. He paused, searching for the right word. Something defiant. Scared, yes, but unwilling to be cowed. It intrigued me. Lily squirmed in his arms, reaching toward a butterfly fluttering past. Alexander carefully turned so she could watch it land on a nearby flower. The tenderness in his movements, the patience in his expression, these were sides of him I'd glimpsed only rarely before I left, sides that Lily drew out effortlessly. "We should head back to the house," he said after a moment. "It's getting warm, and Lily should have her nap soon." I nodded, falling into step beside him as we made our way back through the gardens. Security personnel materialized ahead of us, clearing our path, checking doorways before we passed through them. The constant vigilance that had once seemed paranoid to me now felt necessary with Lily in our care. Mrs. Hendricks met us in the kitchen, where a light lunch had been prepared. "Mr. Castillo called twice while you were out," she informed Alexander. "He insisted it was urgent." A shadow crossed Alexander's face. "Thank you, Mrs. Hendricks. I'll call him after lunch." I recognized the name, Emilio Castillo, one of Alexander's most important business partners. The legitimate side of their partnership involved shipping and import/export. The other side, well, I'd made a point of knowing as little as possible about that. "Business problems?" I asked carefully as we settled at the kitchen table, Lily secured in her high chair with a small plate of cut fruits and cheese. Alexander's expression closed off. "Nothing for you to worry about." The familiar dismissal stung, reminding me of the early days of our relationship when he'd kept me entirely separate from his work. Later, as I'd become more integrated into his life, I'd learned just enough to understand the danger, enough to fear for our future together. If it affects Lily's safety, then it is my concern, I countered, keeping my voice low. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "It doesn't. Not directly. And I won't allow it to." We ate in silence for a while, watching Lily methodically demolish her blueberries. She was focused entirely on her task. Tiny fingers stained purple, oblivious to the tension between her parents. "Emilio's son is getting married next month," Alexander said suddenly. "A large celebration, very public. He's requested our presence." The hour caught me off guard. You want me to attend a Mafia wedding with you? His expression hardened at my bluntness. I want you to accompany me to an important social event, one where my closest associates will be present, where they will meet my daughter for the first time. The implications were clear. This would be Lily's introduction to Alexander's world, her official recognition as his heir. My stomach tightened at the thought. That's a significant step, I said carefully. It's necessary. His tone brooked no argument. The longer we delay her introduction, the more questions will arise. Questions lead to curiosity. Curiosity leads to investigation. I won't have unknown entities taking an interest in my daughter. Put that way, it made a chilling kind of sense. In Alexander's world, anonymity wasn't an option for those closest to him. Better to be known, protected, placed firmly under his shield than to exist in dangerous obscurity. And if I refuse? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. His eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. I would attend alone with Lily. I'd prefer we present a united front, but it's not essential. The casual assertion that he would take our daughter without me sent ice through my veins. You can't just... I can, Eliza. His voice was soft, but implacable. I hope I won't have to, but legally, without established custody arrangements, I have as much right to take her places as you do. Fear and anger surged through me in equal measure. Is that a threat? It's reality. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. I don't want to fight you on this. I want us to work together, for Lily's sake. His touch was warm, familiar in ways that made my heart beat faster despite my anger. I pulled my hand away. You say that, but you're already making decisions without me. Already using Lily to ensure my compliance. Something like hurt flashed across his features before his expression closed again. That's not my intention, isn't it? I challenged. You've given me beautiful rooms, new clothes, access to luxury again, but the moment I disagree with your plans for our daughter, you remind me that you could take her if you wanted to. I would never take her from you, he said, his voice dropping lower. Never permanently. You're her mother. She needs you. The qualification, never permanently, hung in the air between us, a reminder that temporary separation remained a possible consequence of defiance. Before I could respond, Lily yawned widely, her eyelids growing heavy as the excitement of the morning and a full belly caught up with her. Alexander noticed immediately. She needs her nap, he said, rising to lift her from the high chair. I'll take her up. I can do it, I protested. Let me. Not a command this time, but something close to a plea. I've missed 15 months of putting her to bed, of watching her sleep, of being there when she wakes. Let me have this, Eliza. Put that way, I couldn't refuse. I nodded, watching as he tenderly cleaned Lily's sticky hands and face before lifting her into his arms. She went willingly, already half asleep, her small head resting trustingly against his shoulder. I'll be back once she's settled, he promised. We can continue our discussion then. As he left with our daughter, I remained at the table, tangled emotions coursing through me. Part of me, the part that remembered loving him, that recognized the father he was trying to be, wanted to yield, to accept the security he offered, to give Lily the stability of two parents who worked together. But another part, the part that remembered the fear, the control, the danger, resisted fiercely. Alexander's world was violent, unpredictable despite his efforts to control it. Enemies lurked everywhere, vendettas simmered beneath polite business dealings. Was that the legacy I wanted for Lily? I wandered to the massive windows overlooking the cliff, watching waves crash against rocks far below. The isolation of this place, once suffocating, now seemed like a shield, protecting Lily from the harsh realities of both poverty and danger. Here, she would want for nothing. Here, she would be guarded day and night by men willing to die for her because she was Alexander's. The sound of footsteps pulled me from my thoughts. Alexander had returned, his expression somber as he approached. She's asleep, he said. I left the monitor on. Mrs. Hendricks will alert us when she wakes. I nodded, turning back to the window. This view always made me feel small, insignificant against the vastness of the ocean. He came to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body, smell the familiar scent of his cologne. Is that why you would spend hours out here? I always wondered. Partly, I admitted. It was also the one place I felt I could breathe. No security cameras, no guards hovering nearby, just sky and sea and silence. He was quiet for a long moment. I never meant to make you feel trapped, Eliza. I know. And I did know. That was the tragedy of it. Alexander's need for control, for security, wasn't malicious. It stemmed from love, from fear of loss, but the result was the same. But good intentions don't change the reality. What reality is that? He asked softly. I turned to face him fully. That loving you comes at the cost of freedom. That being with you means accepting your world, your rules, your enemies as our own. Something vulnerable flickered in his dark eyes. Is that really so different from any relationship? Don't all partnerships require compromise, acceptance of the other's world? Most partnerships don't include armed guards and rival families who might want to kidnap your child for leverage, I pointed out. No, he conceded. But most don't include the level of protection, provision, and privilege I can offer either. Is that what you think I left over? Wanting more luxury? His jaw tightened. I think you left because you were afraid. Of me. Of my world. Of how deeply you were beginning to care despite that fear. The accuracy of his assessment stole my breath. You make it sound simple. It is simple. He moved closer, one hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from my face. The gentle touch sent electricity skittering across my skin. You were afraid, so you ran. With my child. Now you're back, and we have a chance to do things differently, to find a balance that works for both of us. For all three of us. And if that balance doesn't exist? I whispered. His fingers lingered at my cheek. It exists. We just have to be willing to work for it. Together. The warmth of his touch, the intensity of his gaze, the sincerity in his voice, all combined to create a gravity I found hard to resist. This close, I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, new since I'd left. Signs of stress, of sleepless nights, perhaps of grief. When I found out I was pregnant, I said softly. My first thought was happiness, not fear, not doubt. Just joy at the idea of having your child, of creating something permanent between us. Surprise and something deeper flickered across his features. You never told me that. By the time I knew for certain, I was already gone, already convinced I'd made the right choice in leaving. And now? His voice dropped lower. Do you still believe it was right? I stepped back, breaking the dangerous intimacy between us. I don't know. Seeing you with Lily, watching how you are with her, I shook my head. It complicates things. Complications can be navigated, he said. If we're both willing to try. Before I could respond, the baby monitor crackled with Lily's fretful cry. She'd woken early from her nap, perhaps disturbed by the unfamiliar surroundings. I'll get her, I said quickly, relieved for the interruption. Alexander nodded, letting me go. Take your time. When you're ready, I thought we might swim. The indoor pool is heated, and I had infant swimming gear delivered this morning. Of course he had. Alexander's efficiency in providing for his newly discovered daughter was both impressive and overwhelming. I nodded my acknowledgement before hurrying upstairs, eager for the simple clarity of comforting my child. Lily was standing in her crib, tears streaking her cheeks, arms reaching up as soon as she saw me. Mama, she hiccuped, the distress in her voice tearing at my heart. I'm here, sweet girl, I murmured, lifting her into my arms. Mama's here. She clung to me, her small body gradually relaxing as I rocked her, humming softly. Over her head, my gaze fell on the nursery with its beautiful furnishings, its careful attention to detail, its subtle security measures, a fingerprint scanner disguised in the doorframe, reinforced windows with bulletproof glass, a panic button incorporated into the light switch. Alexander had created this space in hours, a perfect blend of childhood wonder and fortress-like protection. It represented everything he offered: safety, beauty, luxury, and everything that came with those gifts: vigilance, isolation, the ever-present awareness of potential threats. As Lily calmed in my arms, I faced the truth I'd been avoiding since Alexander found us. This wasn't just about what I wanted anymore. It wasn't even just about what was best for Lily. Though that remained paramount, it was about finding a way forward that acknowledged the reality of who we were, all three of us. A reality where Alexander was not just the dangerous man I'd fled from, but also the devoted father Lily deserved to know. Where I was not just the frightened woman who had run, but also the mother who would do anything to protect her child, including, perhaps, learning to trust the one man who threatened my independence, even as he promised to safeguard our future. The week settled into a strange rhythm. Alexander balanced his business obligations with time spent with Lily, visibly torn between the empire that demanded his attention and the daughter he was desperate to know. I watched their bond strengthen daily, Lily's initial wariness giving way to delight whenever he appeared, her tiny hands reaching for him, her face lighting up at the sound of his voice. "Pa," she called for him now with the same enthusiasm she called for me. The words seemed to transform Alexander each time he heard it, softening the hard edges of the man I'd feared enough to flee. On the 7th morning, I found them in the sunroom, Alexander pointing out boats on the distant horizon, while Lily sat in his lap, completely enthralled by his deep voice and the attention he lavished on her. "There's a yacht," he was saying, finger tracing its path across the glass. "Someday I'll take you sailing. Would you like that, little one?" Lily babbled in response, patting the window. He laughed, a genuine sound I'd heard more in the past week than in all our previous time together. The sight of them, framed by morning light, father and daughter forming a bond I'd never expected to witness, made my heart twist painfully in my chest. "You're staring," Alexander said without turning, his acute awareness of his surroundings ever present despite his focus on Lily. "Just thinking," I replied, moving into the room to join them. His eyes met mine as I sat opposite them, dark and searching. About how different you are with her." I gestured toward Lily, who was now attempting to stand on his lap, his large hands supporting her gently. "I've never seen this side of you before." Something vulnerable flickered across his features. "It's not a side I've had much occasion to show." "It suits you," I admitted softly, being a father. The compliment seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, the careful mask he maintained even around me slipped completely, revealing naked emotion, gratitude, hope, something deeper I wasn't ready to name. "Thank you," he said simply. "That means more than you know." Lily chose that moment to lunge toward me, nearly toppling from his grasp. Alexander caught her expertly, passing her into my waiting arms with a rueful smile. "She still prefers you," he observed without bitterness. "I'm familiar," I corrected, settling Lily against my hip. "That's all. She's getting more comfortable with you every day." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I have to leave for a few hours today. A meeting I can't avoid or postpone." The sudden shift in topic caught me off guard. "Business?" "Yes." His tone made it clear he wouldn't elaborate. "Paolo and Marcus will remain here with additional security posted at all entrances. Mrs. Hendricks will be available if you need anything." The idea of being left in his home, surrounded by his men, should have triggered the old claustrophobia. Instead, I felt an unexpected surge of relief, a reprieve from the intensity of his presence, from the constant awareness of him that had never quite faded, even after 15 months apart. "We'll be fine," I assured him. "Lily and I can explore the house a bit more. She enjoys new places." Alexander hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Before I go, there's something I want you to have." Wariness crept through me as he placed the box on the table between us. "Alexander, it's not what you think," he said, correctly reading my expression. "Open it." With Lily balanced on my hip, I reached for the box, flipping it open with one hand. Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a small, intricately detailed elephant. "Bo," I whispered, recognizing the resemblance to Lily's favorite stuffed animal. "For protection," Alexander explained quietly. "The elephant is equipped with a GPS tracker, virtually undetectable. If anything were to happen, if anyone ever tried to take her, we would find her immediately. I should have been angry at the presumption, the technological leash disguised as a gift. Instead, I found myself strangely touched by the thought behind it. In Alexander's world, this was love. Practical, protective, anticipating threats before they materialized. "It's also just a beautiful bracelet," he added, misreading my silence. "Something special from her father. If the tracker bothers you—" "It doesn't," I interrupted, surprising us both. "Not for Lily, not when it could keep her safe." Relief crossed his features. He stood, moving around the table to take the bracelet from the box. "May I?" I nodded, holding Lily steady as Alexander carefully fastened the delicate chain around her tiny wrist. She immediately became fascinated with the elephant charm, trying to put it in her mouth. "Thank you," I said, looking up to find his face closer than I'd expected, his eyes intent on mine. "I would do anything to protect her," he said, his voice low and fierce, "to protect both of you." The intensity in his gaze made my heart race. For a breathless moment, we were suspended in time, his hand still touching Lily's, his face inches from mine, the morning sun casting gold across his features. I could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body, see the subtle flecks of amber in his dark eyes. The moment broke, when Lily squirmed between us, demanding attention. Alexander straightened, composure returning like a physical shield. "I'll be back by dinner," he said, brushing a gentle kiss against Lily's forehead before heading toward the door. At the threshold, he paused, glancing back at us. "Be safe." The words were a command, a plea, and a promise all at once. After he left, the house felt simultaneously emptier and more spacious. Lily and I spent the morning in the gardens, watched from a discreet distance by Paolo, whose vigilance never wavered despite Alexander's absence. After lunch and Lily's nap, restlessness drove me to explore the parts of the mansion I'd avoided during my previous stay. The library was exactly as I remembered. 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive fireplace, leather chairs designed for long hours of reading. What I hadn't known, what I discovered now, was the children's corner Alexander had added in our absence. Plush cushions, shelves of picture books, even a small table with crayons and paper, all waiting for a child who hadn't existed in this house until a week ago. "How long has this been here?" I asked Mrs. Hendricks when she found us exploring. She hesitated, loyalty to Alexander warring with truth. "It was added 6 months after you left, miss. Mr. Vega had it designed, though he never said why. 6 months after I disappeared with his unborn child. Had he somehow known? Or had this been an act of hope, of faith, that someday he would have a family to fill this space?" The thought followed me through the afternoon and into the evening as Lily and I settled in the blue suite, waiting for Alexander's return. Dinner came and went with no sign of him. As I put Lily to bed, worry began to gnaw at me, not just for him, but for what his absence might mean. Business, in Alexander's world, often involved danger. It was past midnight when I heard the front door open, followed by low voices in the foyer. Relief washed through me, surprising in its intensity. I moved to the bedroom doorway, listening as footsteps ascended the stairs, heavier than usual, slightly uneven. When Alexander appeared in the hallway outside our suite, I gasped softly. His pristine suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled. A darkening bruise marred his left cheekbone, and he held himself stiffly, as if favoring his right side. "What happened?" I asked, stepping into the hallway to meet him. He straightened at the sight of me, attempting to mask his discomfort. "A disagreement. Nothing serious." "You're hurt," I insisted, reaching toward his face before catching myself, hand hovering awkwardly between us. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, vulnerability, longing. "It looks worse than it is. Let me help," I said, the words emerging before I could question them. "Please." He hesitated, then nodded, allowing me to guide him into the blue suite. In the bathroom, I found a first aid kit, comprehensive, hospital grade, and returned to find him seated on the edge of my bed, jacket removed, tie loosened. "Lily?" he asked as I set the kit beside him. "Asleep," I assured him, dampening a cloth with warm water. She went down easily tonight. His eyes followed my movements as I approached. You don't have to do this, Eliza. I know. I stepped between his knees, gently pressing the cloth to his cheekbone. He flinched slightly, then held still. But I want to. The admission hung in the air between us as I carefully cleaned the cut on his face. This close, I could see the fatigue in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he controlled his breathing to mask pain. Ribs? I asked quietly. A small nod. Bruised. Not broken. My hand moved from his face to the buttons of his shirt before I could overthink the gesture. He remained motionless as I unfastened them, revealing the tanned skin beneath, marred by an angry purple bruise spreading across his right side. Alexander, I breathed, fingers hovering above the injury. This isn't nothing. It's the cost of doing business, he replied, his voice rougher than before. The cost of keeping what's mine safe. The implication was clear. Whatever had happened tonight had been in service to his empire, his family, his control. His protection extended to Lily and me, but at a price paid in blood, sometimes his own. I pressed a cold compress gently against his ribs, aware of his sharp intake of breath, the heat of his skin beneath my fingers. We'd been in this position before, during our time together, me tending his wounds, him accepting care he would allow from no one else. You should have called, I said softly. Let me know you'd be late. His eyes sought mine, surprise evident. Would you have worried? Yes, I admitted, the truth easier in the quiet intimacy of the moment. I did worry. Something shifted in his expression. A softening. A hope he couldn't quite suppress. His hand came up to cover mine where it rested against his side, warm and steady despite his injuries. I missed this, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Missed you. The confession hung between us, honest in a way Alexander rarely allowed himself to be. I should have stepped away, maintained the boundaries I'd been so careful to establish since our reunion. Instead, I found myself swaying closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his eyes, the familiar scent of his skin, the heat of his touch. Alexander, I breathed, uncertain if his name was a warning or an invitation. His free hand rose to cut my cheek, thumb brushing gently across my lower lip. Tell me to stop, he murmured. And I will. In the silence that followed, with Lily sleeping peacefully in the next room, and Alexander's dark eyes searching mine for permission, for forgiveness, for something more, I made a choice. Not just about this moment, but about our future, about the possibility that fear and love could coexist, that protection didn't have to mean captivity, that we might find a balance between his world and mine. I closed the distance between us.